Rachel Morgan was a beloved Ohio schoolteacher whose dream vacation to Dubai should have ended with souvenirs and photographs. But instead, it became the beginning of one of the most chilling international mysteries her hometown had ever heard. Rachel Morgan was the kind of person people described as steady, thoughtful, and dependable. At 32, she had spent nearly a decade teaching at an elementary school in a quiet Ohio town. She loved her students, loved the rhythm of lesson plans and after-school activities, but friends often said she longed for something more than the small circles of routine life. Travel had always fascinated her, though she rarely allowed herself the luxury of it. For years, she set aside a portion of her paycheck, watching the balance slowly grow, until she could finally book the trip she had dreamed about since college. Dubai seemed to hold everything that Rachel wanted to experience. A city where the future gleamed in glass towers, yet the past whispered across the desert sands. She made lists of the places she wanted to see: the Burj Khalifa, the vast malls filled with aquariums and indoor ski slopes, the desert safaris where she imagined riding camels against the backdrop of the setting sun. For Rachel, this wasn't just a vacation. It was a chance to step out of the predictable and prove to herself she could live boldly, even if only for a few weeks. Her family was proud, but nervous when she told them. Traveling alone so far from home felt risky, but Rachel insisted she had planned every detail with care. Flights, hotel reservations, even a travel journal tucked neatly in her bag. To her, it was more than safe, it was liberating. As she boarded her plane at the Cleveland airport, she messaged a friend that she felt ready for the greatest adventure of her life. No one imagined that the journey she began with such excitement would end in silence, unanswered questions, and a mystery that still haunts those who knew her. When Rachel's return date arrived, her family prepared for the familiar routine of airport greetings. Her mother drove to Cleveland Hopkins International Airport with a homemade welcome sign, ready to hear stories about glittering skylines and desert sunsets. The flight landed on schedule, passengers streamed out of the gate, but Rachel never appeared. At first, her family thought she had missed a connection or been delayed at customs. They waited, scanning each face, but the crowd thinned until the terminal was nearly empty. Calls to her phone rang without answer. Messages sat unread. Friends checked her social media, expecting excited updates about the final days of her trip, but her last post was 2 weeks old. Rachel was the kind of person who shared every milestone, from classroom decorations to birthday dinners, so her sudden online silence felt strange. Hours turned into a restless night. By morning, her mother began calling airlines, trying to confirm if Rachel had boarded her flight. There was no record of her checking in. The family contacted the U.S. Embassy in the United Arab Emirates, hoping for reassurance. Instead, officials admitted Rachel had not passed through Dubai's airport departure gates. Somewhere between her hotel and the terminal, she had vanished. The small Ohio town that once celebrated Rachel's adventurous spirit now buzzed with unease. Neighbors left casseroles at the Morgan home, whispering about kidnappings and scams they had read about online. Police in Ohio opened a missing persons case, but quickly noted the investigation would need international cooperation. To those who loved her, Rachel's absence was more than a bureaucratic issue. It was a fracture in their lives. She had left full of excitement and promise, and now there was only silence, a growing sense that something far darker had unfolded. Investigators traced Rachel's last known movements through travel records, hotel receipts, and surveillance cameras. Their search led them to a modest, yet comfortable hotel in the heart of downtown Dubai, not far from the bustling shopping districts. Staff at the front desk remembered her clearly, friendly, polite, and always carrying a small notebook where she scribbled down details about her daily plans. She had checked in for a 3-week stay, and by all accounts, nothing about her behavior seemed unusual. She booked guided tours, explored the city, and returned to her room most evenings. But on her 21st day, the routine changed. Records showed she checked out in the early morning hours without giving notice. Surveillance footage captured her leaving the lobby with only a small backpack slung across her shoulder. What stood out most was what she left behind. In her room, investigators discovered her larger suitcase, still packed with clothes neatly folded. Even more concerning, her U.S. passport remained inside a drawer, tucked between a guidebook and her travel journal. It was as if she had expected to return, but never did. The hotel staff recalled nothing unusual about her departure, though a receptionist mentioned she seemed distracted the night before, pacing near the elevators and checking her phone repeatedly. The cleaning staff found no signs of struggle in her room, no overturned furniture, no broken locks. The only anomaly was a half-finished cup of coffee on the desk, gone cold by the time it was discovered. Authorities were left with a troubling question. Why would a cautious traveler abandon her luggage and identification in a foreign country? To investigators, the evidence suggested she hadn't left willingly. The mystery deepened, and her trail was about to lead somewhere far more unsettling. When investigators reviewed the hotel's security tapes in greater detail, one detail stopped them cold. 2 days before Rachel checked out, she was seen in the lobby cafe, seated across from a man none of the staff could identify. He was older, perhaps in his late 40s, dressed sharply in a tailored gray suit. While Rachel often kept to herself, here she appeared focused, listening intently as the man leaned in close. Their meeting lasted less than 20 minutes, after which they walked out together into the crowded streets. She returned alone later that evening. The following morning, the same man appeared again, this time entering through a side door and heading straight to the cafe, as if he knew exactly where he was going. He ordered nothing, lingered briefly, then vanished from the building. Within hours, hotel records showed that a guest under the name Daniel Cross had checked out from the floor below Rachel's. But investigators quickly discovered that no such person existed. The identification used for the booking was fake, and the address on the reservation led to a vacant lot thousands of miles away. It became clear that Rachel's chance meeting wasn't chance at all. The man had been staying in the same hotel, likely watching her before making contact. His careful departure under a false identity suggested planning, not coincidence. The question now was what role he played in Rachel's disappearance. Dubai police circulated still images from the footage to international databases, but no match was found. Whoever this man was, he had managed to stay invisible. For Rachel's family, the discovery was both a breakthrough and a nightmare. She hadn't simply vanished on her own. Someone had been there, someone who seemed to know exactly how to make her disappear. Weeks of searching produced little progress until a call came into Dubai's police hotline from a group of recreational off-road drivers. They had been exploring deep in the desert, far from the main roads, when they spotted the twisted shell of a burned-out vehicle partially buried by shifting sand. At first, it looked like nothing more than the wreckage of an abandoned car, but closer inspection revealed signs of deliberate destruction. The fire hadn't been accidental. It had been set. Forensic teams arrived quickly, documenting every fragment that remained. The vehicle's identification numbers had been filed off, but investigators managed to trace it through partial records back to a rental company in the city. The car had been rented under another false identity, one that shared a connection to the same fake documents used by the suited man at Rachel's hotel. Inside the charred frame, police recovered fragments of electronics melted together, including what appeared to be a phone and a laptop. Among the ashes were pieces of clothing that matched the style Rachel had been wearing in earlier footage. Most disturbing of all was a partially intact driver's license. Though blackened and warped, the name, Rachel Morgan, was still visible, burned into the plastic. No human remains were present, but the discovery was chilling. Investigators believe the fire was meant to destroy evidence, erasing any trace of the vehicle's occupant. The car's location raised further questions. It was hidden miles into the desert, a place few tourists would ever venture on their own. Someone had driven it there deliberately, then set it ablaze. For Rachel's family, the news shattered lingering hope that she had simply lost contact. Something far darker had occurred, and it was clear her disappearance was no accident. The mystery was no longer just about where Rachel had gone. It was about what she had uncovered. The discovery in the desert shifted the investigation into a new phase. Authorities combed through Rachel's financial history, searching for irregularities. What they found stunned both local police and her family back in Ohio. 3 days before her disappearance, Rachel had authorized a transfer of $15,000 from her personal savings account. The money was routed through several international banks before landing in an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. For a schoolteacher with modest means, the amount was significant. The bigger question was why she sent it, and to whom. The account belonged to a shell company that had no real office, no employees, and no website. On paper, it was connected to various small businesses scattered across the United States. But one name surfaced in the paperwork that changed the direction of the case. A man once charged with fraud in Ohio. He had briefly worked at the same school district where Rachel taught, leaving under suspicion after an embezzlement scandal. Though he had never been convicted, his reputation was stained. Investigators now wondered whether Rachel's decision to travel overseas was tied to him in some way. The connection between Dubai and Ohio unsettled everyone. Was Rachel tricked into believing she was investing in something legitimate? Did she trust someone from her past enough to send such a large sum? The transfer date, so close to her disappearance, suggested it wasn't coincidence. For her family, the revelation felt like a betrayal. Rachel was known for her cautious nature with money, clipping coupons and saving diligently. To suddenly part with such a large amount indicated pressure, or perhaps manipulation. What began as a missing persons case was now unraveling into something larger, an organized scheme that reached far beyond a single woman's trip abroad. Back in Ohio, investigators turned their attention to Rachel's apartment. It was tidy, with lesson plans still neatly stacked on her desk and her favorite coffee mug waiting in the sink. But in her bedroom closet, tucked away inside a shoebox, they found her personal laptop. The device became a crucial piece of evidence once forensic analysts began combing through its files. What they discovered raised more questions than answers. Hidden among lesson materials and family photos were encrypted emails written weeks before Rachel's trip. At first, they looked like harmless correspondence, job offers, travel confirmations, routine exchanges. But once decrypted, a disturbing picture emerged. The messages described an opportunity to tutor children of wealthy families abroad. The pay was unusually high, the benefits lavish, and the arrangements sounded almost too good to be true. For Rachel, who loved teaching and longed for adventure, the proposal might have seemed irresistible. Digging deeper, analysts traced the origin of the emails. They did not come from legitimate recruiters, but from servers linked to fraudulent accounts. Shockingly, the digital trail circled back to the same Ohio man tied to the offshore company that received Rachel's $15,000. He had created an elaborate ruse, posing as an international education consultant, weaving together fake documents and contracts that appeared genuine. The implication was chilling. Rachel's trip had not been a spontaneous adventure. It had been carefully engineered. She thought she was stepping into an exciting career opportunity, when in reality, she was walking into a trap. The emails painted her disappearance in a new light. This was no random crime abroad. Someone with ties to her hometown had set events in motion, exploiting her trust and ambition. The mystery was no longer just international. It had roots buried in her own past. The investigation took a dramatic turn when Dubai authorities raided a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It had been leased under the same fraudulent identity used by the mysterious man seen with Rachel. From the outside, the building looked ordinary, its faded metal doors blending into a row of storage units. But once inside, investigators uncovered a scene that spoke to something far more sinister than a single disappearance. The front of the warehouse contained shelves stacked with boxes labeled as household goods. Yet when opened, they held a jumble of personal items: women's clothing, cosmetics, and travel accessories. In one corner stood several suitcases, each tagged with different airlines from various countries. There were passports too, dozens of them, belonging to women of multiple nationalities. Some were genuine, others expertly forged. Among them was one that stopped investigators in their tracks, a duplicate of Rachel Morgan's passport, identical in appearance but clearly counterfeit. Behind a false wall at the rear of the warehouse, police found even more disturbing evidence: filing cabinets filled with contracts, resumes, and letters of recommendation. All appeared to be part of the same fraudulent scheme promising teaching or tutoring jobs overseas. It was a system designed to lure educated women into the region, only for them to vanish. For investigators, the discovery confirmed what many had feared. Rachel had fallen victim to a trafficking network operating under the guise of opportunity. The sophistication of the setup suggested powerful figures were involved, people who knew how to cover their tracks and erase evidence. The warehouse raid was a breakthrough, yet it raised haunting questions. How many others had disappeared before Rachel? How many families back home were waiting for answers they would never receive. What was uncovered wasn't just one woman's tragedy, but part of a much larger web. Despite the breakthrough at the warehouse, Rachel herself remained missing. Investigators scoured airports, shipping records, and border control logs, hoping to trace her movements. Yet no official record showed her leaving Dubai. It was as though she had simply vanished into thin air. Intelligence officials speculated that she may have been moved under a false identity, slipped through checkpoints with forged documents like the duplicate passport found in the warehouse. If that were true, her trail could extend anywhere in the world. Others believed the truth was even darker. The burned car in the desert suggested someone had tried to erase evidence of her existence. Without remains, certainty was impossible, but the possibility that Rachel had been silenced lingered heavily over the investigation. The absence of answers left her family trapped in a cycle of hope and grief, never knowing whether she was alive in some hidden corner or gone forever. The case attracted international attention. Media outlets framed Rachel's story as a warning about the dangers of traveling alone, but those who knew her rejected such simplifications. Rachel had been cautious, organized, and prepared. What happened to her was not the result of recklessness, but of deception, of a system built to exploit trust and ambition. Over time, the official investigation slowed, hampered by international red tape and the influence of shadowy figures likely tied to the network. Leads dried up, and the trail went cold. Yet her disappearance continued to haunt both Ohio and Dubai, a reminder that not every story ends with justice. Rachel Morgan's name now sits among the long list of unresolved cases. She set out for adventure and discovery, carrying dreams larger than her small hometown, only to vanish into a silence that still echoes, leaving behind fragments of a life interrupted.